Talk Show.
Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we kick off our Werewolves of Summer retrospective, a return to classic werewolf movies and a few new surprises with The Werewolf of London this week, starring Henry Hall. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the Alex Van Helsing novels. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars and co-creator of the comic Psycom from Tokyo Pop, and Clockworks from Humanoid. Say hello.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, writer for Rockabilly Online and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello, Drew.
I'm so happy to be doing Werewolf again.
I'm so excited that you are excited. Your excitement is a wave of vibes coming my way. And finally, in Austin, special guest Jamie Barr. All three of you in Austin. We got everybody from Austin this week.
Yeah.
Jamie Barr, musician, pinup model, educator, and the lead vocalist and upright bassist for Austin's premier all-female rock and roll band, Danger Cakes, which you can find at dangercakes.net. Their new album is Quarter Life Crisis. Say hi, Jamie.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay. According to Wikipedia, Werewolf of London is a 1935 horror film starring Henry Hall and produced by Universal Pictures. Jack Pierce's eerie werewolf makeup was simpler than his version, seen 6 years later in what we might call a reboot for Lon Chaney Jr. in The Wolfman. This is Werewolf of London, 1935. It is the first Hollywood mainstream, anyway, werewolf movie. There were essentially two, according to my limited research, two previous brief, silent, werewolf-ish kind of movies in 1913 and 1925. But this is the first time we see a Wolfman. So we are into Werewolf of London, and we're also back with Werewolves, which we did a look at Werewolves about a year ago. So, Drew, why have you brought us here, and tell us your opening thoughts about Werewolf of London?
Well, I've seen this movie so many times I actually don't remember the very first time I have seen it, so I won't go into that. What I will go into is why I think it was important to start with this movie, to start with this particular film. The last Werewolf retrospective, we basically did the three versions of the Wolfman. We did the original Wolfman, Curse of the Werewolf, and the recent remake of the Wolfman. Now, this actually predates. This is the granddaddy, the great-granddaddy of all werewolf movies, and I actually think it's a lot. Most people just kind of see it as a dry run for the Wolfman and sort of treat it as a footnote. I actually think it's more interesting than that. It's very atmospheric in the way 30s horror films only can be. I know a lot of people don't like the werewolf design in this. I actually really like the werewolf makeup in this. And I think the werewolf mythology in this movie is very, very fascinating in that it's different in a lot of ways than what we're used to, but it's also leading towards the more commonplace mythology that we would see popularized by the Wolfman. And I'm sure we'll get into all of that when we're discussing it. But I'm a big fan of this movie. I'm really happy to be starting out with it because we are starting literally at the beginning of Hollywood werewolf movies. So I can't wait to get into this.
And I think you could legitimately say, despite those two interesting silent curios, neither of which are really werewolf movies in the way we understand them, we could go ahead and call this the first werewolf movie. I mean, I think it's pretty fair to shorthand it that way.
It's the strongest contender, yeah. And is what we would think of as a werewolf movie.
So, all right, Tony, opening thoughts, Werewolf of London.
I like the movie, but I don't know. For me, I can't remember the last time I saw it, but wasn't as memorable a movie for me. I don't know, something about it this time around didn't gel as much, even though I like a lot of bits that are in it, and I like the werewolf design as well. I dig it. But I don't know. It's good, but it's not great for me.
All right, good. You'll be able to be an anchoring sentiment.
Well,
Jamie,
his feelings are actually the feelings of I think a lot of horror fandom. It's not unusual.
Dry run, sort of underwhelming. That's interesting. Ms. Jamie, what are your thoughts? Have you seen this movie before, and where are you landing on it now?
I had seen it once before, a couple of years ago with Drew, but I watched it last weekend before I knew I was even going to be on this show, and I have to say I really enjoyed the movie, and I like the conversations that it definitely stirs. So I would definitely say if I were to watch this movie with someone, I would watch it with, like, probably it was fun watching it with my significant other, not just as a date, but just to talk about interesting things that I feel like men notice versus women noticed, or maybe partner and partner. But I found the love story very interesting, and I don't know, it seems like everybody always talks about the werewolf makeup, and I feel like there's that element of this, not just the how did it happen, but this, the tortured soul end of it, but where, spoiler alert, they don't end up together at the end because, he dies. But I found that his lady love stayed by his side, although, even though technically being courted by her high school,
Isn't that delightful?
beau.
Oh my gosh, yes.
That suddenly he's like, oh, this is just happening now. And, and you kind of feel bad for this guy who, in one way, the fact that there's multiple people who have been, cursed with this whole thing. And I just found so much of this movie charming about, the flower that only blooms at night, when the full moon rises, and that, I could think, I was like, why couldn't they both just hold the flower? They couldn't just sit around together, both like, hey, people in the Middle East, men will hold hands. Why can't these two strangers just come together over a flower and hold hands? But no, this man steals his flower, just as his wife is being kind of courted. But I felt like the flower always belonged to him. He was the one who went all the way up to, the middle of nowhere to get it. He trekked all that way, and just to have someone kind of steal it from underneath him.
Which is funny, because that's what's going on in both, just for the reader in case you're lost on the flower aspect, werewolfism catches, and the one thing that you can beat it with is the salve from this particular exotic Tibetan flower.
Not even a salve. He holds the flower in his hand. That's it.
Scratches himself with it, basically. Yeah. Actually, if they made it a salve, that might have worked. I'm with
they could have done so much with it. They might have been able to make an extract.
That's not how men operate. That's the interesting fable-like nature of this film, is that that's not how men operate. Men want all the flower, basically, and that's going on twice. Okay.
Well, even that is men versus nature. I just found every part of this movie to be enjoyable. Well, maybe not enjoyable every way, but very, very, like I said, charming is a good word.
Very good. So just to pick up on that, and not to cover too much, because we'll get right into the story. I dig the werewolf makeup. I really like it. I think it is very much. I think it's a totally cool representation of a man who has caught a wolfish sickness, in a sense. I thought it was a really interesting idea, and in many ways, I find it just as watchable, certainly, as the makeup in The Wolfman. So it's I was fully pleased by that. But I love the love story. I love the many instances of questions about fidelity and infidelity and jealousy and ownership and all that stuff that goes on in here, and also all this crazy stuff about class. So this is actually a movie that covers a lot more. I don't know. It thinks about a lot more things in a way as far as society than the 1941 film, which is a very, very personal look at Lawrence Talbot. This one is, I think, a fairly personal look at this guy, but it has a lot to say about men and women and the rich versus the poor and all that. So, and it's only 75 minutes, so you can get all of that in an atmospheric little Universal picture, and then it's over. That was amazing. All right, so let's start with Tibet. So this movie opens in Tibet with an American actor named Henry Hall. This is a Universal thing where, I don't know why, I think maybe Americans felt the British to be extremely exotic or something, or extremely, enviable in the 1930s. So Henry Hall was playing...
it's because that we weren't that far removed from the British Empire at that point.
It must be. And also in the 30s, all actors are either, even in regular American movies, are either doing an English accent generally, or they're doing what at the time all actors were trained with what was called a mid-Atlantic accents, which if you think about it, there's nothing in the middle of the Atlantic. It's just this accent that is supposed to sound like maybe you're British, maybe you're American, a lot of soft vowels, and I think maybe because if you lifted your voice, that kind of a affected accent carried pretty well on recording equipment, and so everybody talks with this sort of soft, semi-British sound, except for the Cockney poor people who we meet. But anyway, we open in Tibet with this expedition of Henry Hall that is, I think, supposed to make us think of the very exciting expedition to find Tutankhamun's tomb, which was just like 10 years before this movie. They've got Sherpas, they've got all their gear. There's a big map that shows us all the places that they've been. It's Indiana Jones-ish in that kind of way. And these guys, these are scientists. They're British. They got everything together. They're brave, and they're heading up into the mountains, which is California, actually. But they're heading up into the mountains to find an exotic Tibetan flower that I won't even try to...
Mariphasa.
The Mariphasa. And there's two things interesting. First, they are struck by something mysterious, and the movie doesn't do anything with this afterwards.
Well, they run across a priest that tells them, a Catholic priest who's living up there who tells them not to go there because the locals think that the valley is filled with demons. Yes,
which is very similar to Dracula, which would come out in 1931, just a few years before this. The whole idea, don't go near there, but our heroes, they want to go there. That's their plot. And this is a very familiar theme. And then when they're climbing, though, something strange happens that never gets referred to again, but there's magic in these hills, because first the assistant of Henry Hall, this other British guy who we never meet again, who actually sounds a lot like a British guy from Brooklyn sometimes, he can't, his feet are frozen, and then he moves, and then something physically, invisibly strikes Henry Hall. He goes, something struck me, and pins him to the wall for a second. It's the weirdest thing, or did anybody else pick up on this, or am I making too much?
Well, I think it's one of the criticisms that is constantly brought up against this movie is that it's derivative, and that you bringing up Dracula it is that sort of supernaturalism that we do associate with, you're going into Dracula's castle, and so the idea that there's phantoms or demons or whatever you want to call them in this valley, and that they might hold people back is it's just sort of setting up what comes after. And the rules of what a horror film were. We're still kind of what a horror film would be. We're still being crafted. So nowadays somebody might go, oh, well, that's a bit much. We can't have phantoms in a werewolf movie. Werewolf movie is just about werewolves. And, back in the 30s, people were a little bit more flexible. They're like, why the hell not? If werewolves are real, why not demons?
Well, and also it's one of those. I think you said it exactly right. It's just like in the beginning of Dracula, when the character going into Dracula's castle always encounters a whole bunch of like weird, mysterious stuff that may not be mentioned again, but it sets the scene that you're moving into a realm of mystery that man doesn't understand, which is something that we're going to get back to.
Can I actually interject that real quick? Because I feel like
you don't even have to ask.
I didn't think of it as okay. Well, I'm polite. I don't like to talk over, but I feel like that whole scene didn't strike me actually as supernatural at all, which everyone's like, oh, it's this mystery. I felt like, it was windy, yeah, and something struck me, and then suddenly the werewolf is there, and he wrestles with the guy, maybe because he just was looking for the flower. Then you realize oh gosh, and Jason, I know you probably can help me out with his name, the gentleman.
Yeah, Dr. Yogami. But
Dr. Yogami, who unfortunately is not an actual Asian man.
No, he's Swedish. Warner Roland is a Swedish actor who, because of his features, which for some reason struck Hollywood people as being vaguely Asian, plays a lot of Japanese people.
He was Fu Manchu. He was Charlie Chan. He's actually really good, and that's something I'd like to get into after once we're further into the movie is whether or not we can be okay with it, because I think he is actually a pretty good actor. But obviously,
but him being there, that's the reason he suddenly shows up. He's the wolf man. You say that there's demons and whatnot. I took it as the wind. I've got knocked around. I mean, you live in Colorado. That's the mountains. There's got to be.
That's totally true.
So I had just taken it on that face value because I was.
So you
at
think
that point,
these guys were just psyching themselves? You think they were just psyching themselves out? Basically.
Yeah, and here's the other thing I also thought about, where I thought that instead of the whole Wolfman, I know you want to segue into the makeup and the effects, Jason, and this is the perfect time to, because when he goes into that whole transformation, you realize, well, the first werewolf to attack him in the first place was Dr. Yorigama, and he was there to Yorigami. What is it? Yogami?
Dr. Yogami.
Yogami with an A is actually a Japanese name that exists. I don't know about Yogami, but I think it's the same thing.
Transforms into, he's the werewolf that attacks him in the first place because he says it's his flower. He's been looking for that as well. So
basically you've got a second expedition going on.
Well,
they find the flower, and then another werewolf.
Why couldn't this have been some? Poison ivy is a horrible skin rash, right? But even poison ivy has a remedy found in nature where there's a little orange flower that usually grows within 15 to 20 feet of it. That maybe a little longer, but that you can actually make a salve out. You actually do. You rub the flower on your skin. But some people are so horribly affected by poison ivy that it's almost crippling, where their eyes swell up, everything. Why couldn't this be a disease in this time period? I know he's werewolf, but think of also, wasn't the Elephant Man, the first Elephant Man, didn't that come out around this time period?
No, but it came out a lot later. But the idea is the same.
Well,
I think there's something.
She means the literal Elephant Man, Jason.
Oh,
yeah.
The actual
that was when he was kind of, I actually grew up in a city with a man who, my mom knew who had elephantitis. This is something where, this poor man does not look, like he's supposed to. And, you know, this is somebody who has a beautiful soul. He is the sweetest gentleman. But this is someone who's been affected by a terrible condition. Now, on top of it, so I kind of feel like there are all these supernatural, if you say, aspects that, but I think of it as like, oh, well, old wives' tales and, you know, things that people just kind of say, and that this person has just been afflicted with this horrible, horrible thing where suddenly they're just covered in hair. Alopecia. He could just have lost it. You know, he could have been powder, you know, and that would have been something. I guess powder was a little supernatural too.
But you're not wrong, because I think in, you know, who knows where science is actually in the 30s, but in the pop culture in the 30s, I think you're right. I think in this movie there is not a clear division between science and the supernatural. In fact, they're mixed.
He's Wolfman like in a freak show carnival. He looks, you know, suddenly he's covered in hair, and they show the transformation. And that's what I was getting to with the makeup, is that, you know, most horror movies, there's a few of them, don't take that
we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Are we? Oh, okay.
Makeup.
All right.
Before we get to the makeup, though, I want to very quickly. After he does briefly tussle with a werewolf, and he receives a very important bite, and then we go to London, and I think we will get a chance to talk about this science stuff here, because in London, we follow this character back to London after that beginning, and we meet, you know, Henry Hall in his regular surroundings of a bunch of very wealthy people who are...
Well, he runs this great botanical garden that's full of flesh-eating plants, which is more, you know, atmospherics, you know, you know, and, you know, there's a lot of talk about the division between, you know, the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom, which is kind of gearing us up for the division between the animal kingdom and the human race, which is what we get into.
Yeah, and it's that feeling, again, also getting to what Jamie was saying, where there's a kind of a new, fresh, childlike confusion about the mysteries of the world, and oh, look, there are plants that eat animals, which of course there are, and you know, and how could God create such a thing? And by the way, you also get a lot of comedy here, because we get to see, I think this is intended, remember, it's the Depression, right? So I think what's going on is, for the audience, we get to watch how the rich people really live it up. And they don't just live it up, but they're like bragging really to us. They're talking to one another about their houses and how awesome they are.
Like, to me, it had every rich person from every hand-wringing rich person from every Three Stooges comedy ever. Anytime the Stooges have to interact with rich people, it's all of the rich people in this movie. Like, oh man, that was really hard for me.
I would say they almost seem like a bunch of Margaret Dumonts from the Marx Brothers films. To me,
any of that.
That's what it reminds me of.
But it's all of that. Like, the rich, almost every rich person in here, like, that they interact at every party, at everything, is like, it's weird. It's a comedy rich person. A rich person in that time period who were in comedies. It's really kind of bizarre. At, like, you know, they're almost fainting at the, you know, mouse-eating plant, and
their manners
all the guys,
high.
all the male characters are like, the country club, blah blah blah. Like,
well, the other
I can't take any of them seriously at all, because it's all the same people, like, who would be annoyed at the Three Stooges.
It's totally brother.
Well, the other thing that's interesting about it, though, is the costuming on the women looks contemporary of the 30s, but the men are all dressed very Victorian.
Yeah,
that's what I liked about the movie, that it had that Victorian feel about it. I was like, and, you know, it's like when you see a picture that's trying to be of a certain time period, and you're like, oh man, that looks, you know, just like insert decade. this movie was so much,
it's possible that black tie that you would wear to a party probably looked fairly stuck in the 19th century, even in the 30s.
Well, I said, the Victorian era was not actually that far away from this.
Yeah.
Which is
absolutely. Yeah. No, you're exactly right.
Now let's just say men's fashion hasn't exactly gone completely crazy.
No.
It's been since how much has it really changed in the last 200 years, really?
No, men still
everybody
wear
still wears
jackets
suits,
and ties
still wears pants and shirts. It's still very much the same. Women, like, what clothing we get to have anymore. There's always different styles, but for some reason, it seems like there's less and less fabric. But, that doesn't seem to happen with the men folk, does it?
No,
and that's something else that also is, kind of interesting in this movie. It's
women
one of
are
the things
under
that I
more
kind of
pressure.
do like it. Yeah.
I mean, there's a pressure for women to wear in these movies to wear clothing that makes them prizes, whereas men are wearing a uniform. Essentially, it's a uniform of their class. Of black pants, black jacket, white tie. Now, among all these idiots that Tony was talking about, we meet the aunt, and she's just bought. She's so delighted because she bought a huge house in a bad part of town, which she thinks is hilarious. And it's the worst of gentrification in 1935. And and if you're sitting in the audience, you're like, hey, I live in a bad part of town, because it's all bad parts of town. It's the freaking Depression. But, these guys are above all that. And moving through that is Henry Hall, and he is the only one taking anything – well, no, there are two people taking things seriously. I guess three, so I apologize for that. There's three people who take anything seriously. There's Henry Hall. He's a scientist, and he wants to work on his damn flowers. And he's like, would you people please get out of my house? You're all idiots, and I want to work in my lab. There is Henry Hall's long-suffering wife, whose name is I thought it was Chanel, but
you should stop for a second. Give him a little bit more credit. He's not just. he is a little obsessive. Like, he's pretty obsessive about the flowers, but he's trying to save humanity. It's he really is trying for something great. He's trying to harness the power. Like, if he can understand why, And this was an age of exploration, and.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, he's Indiana Jones. He went all the way into the mountains to get this flower, and then he comes back.
But he's kind of a cold fish. I mean,
okay.
He's not
the most likable
He's definitely
guy.
not Larry. He's definitely not Larry Talbot, who was.
He's definitely no Harrison Ford or no actual Indiana Jones.
But remember, Larry? Yeah, you're right. Larry comes to England, and he immediately starts macking on the shop girl, right? But this guy is already married to this beautiful girl named Lisa, and she cannot get him out of his lab to spend any time with her or go on dates with her or eat breakfast with her, because he's always moping around and wanting to get back into his lab.
He's Reed Richards.
Yes. Well, and the movie is a warning, basically, I think, to all of us who might want to be Reed Richards. I mean, and this is basically a central theme of this movie is – you can lose yourself in your work, and you can destroy everything, including your marriage. Because
she does. I believe she loved him to the end. I believe she loved him to the day he dropped it on the stairs.
Yes. No, you're right. Go ahead.
The other two important characters we meet at this party, as far as like, there's the wife. We get to see Dr. Glendon being Dr. Glendon. Then we have her childhood, I guess, boyfriend, for lack of a better term, and then Dr. Yukami. There's a lot of stuff. This is a very
up until marriage age. He did actually ask her to marry him, and she said no. So childhood and on, they were sweethearts. They were an item, and they're not an item anymore. And
well, he's a ace fighter pilot, I guess, and he's moved. He now owns a ranch out in California, which makes him seem super cool.
I mean, so we have now the world-traveling but kind of cold, brilliant scientist, the beautiful, smart but vulnerable wife, and now the adventuring Scotland Yard consultant, ranch-owning, world adventurer pilot dude who has come in and said, you know, your wife seems really bored. Do you mind if I start taking her out to a couple of parties? And which I just think is so much a delightful thing. It's so this movie has the most cheery infidelity subplot I've ever seen, because these characters just carry on, and it's not a full-on, like, it's not about an affair. It's about a sort of strange, almost affair that is a real. It's meant to show us, the audience, you know,
it's not sexual, but it's an actual. Like, it becomes, because even though it's in her eyes a platonic friendship, you know that he wants more, and then there's that.
We know he wants more because he says, "Hey, I see you're miserable with your husband. You should come back to be with me." And she literally, boy, how skillful is this woman? She's like, "Oh, don't be silly." She goes,
I
said all this
love
before.
that this movie is so, and this is the thing that I like about this movie, is that it's so tight. We get all of this setup that we're talking about right here. And then they still have these great scenes with him and Dr. Yogami setting up all the werewolf mythology that we need for the rest of the movie, and how the werewolf mythology ties in to this love triangle, because you know, Dr. Yogami and him meet up, and he starts talking about what it is to be a werewolf.
Well, you plant a seed. That's Othello right there. You know, if he's already jealous of his wife's high school boyfriend and her new platonic boo on her side, I guess. But,
sexless
you know,
lover.
He's already like, oh, man, like, I'm in my office and he's having his own dilemmas. What do we do when we're angry? We take it out on somebody. So he, like, when she is around, he snaps at her. And he is cold to her. And then, you know, like, that's where it begins. That's the, you know, the crack in the foundation that brings the house down.
The thing when they have the initial confrontation between him and Dr. Yogami, the thing that's very important that is set up here, and this is to me the central thing that sets this apart from other werewolf movies, and how this fits into all this talk of infidelity or potential infidelity, especially dealing with this very cold guy. Dr. Yogami warns him that there are 2 werewolves in London right now, and one of them's suffering could be eased by this flower. But his final warning, because Dr. Glendon kind of just brushes him off. He's like, "Oh, what a bunch of superstitious nonsense," and Yogami says to him, and it's very ominous. I love Olin's line deliveries in this. Yeah. The werewolf will instinctively seek out to kill the one it loves best. Yeah. It's true love. And what we have now, tying into all the stuff we were just talking about, is that we have a man who cannot express his rage at another man coming into his marriage until he is literally an animal.
And we also get back to the theme that Jamie brought out, which was the curious mixture of science and supernatural here, because he says, so Warner Olin is playing a scientist who's also a werewolf, and he's talking to another scientist who's also a werewolf, and and he says, what is this thing? And this thing, he says, is he calls it a satanic creature. It is neither good nor bad. It is a satanic creature.
The other thing that I love about it, too, is it's not lycanthropy. It is lycanthrophobia, which would actually be fear of werewolves.
Fear of wolves. Well, yeah, because and there's more to that, because he looks it up. Hull looks up lycanthrophobia, which actually sort of makes sense in this context, because he says the werewolf acts the way he acts. He has to kill every night during the full moon in order to stave off becoming a wolf forever. In other words, it's the fear of becoming a complete beast that makes him need to be an intermediary beast, which is a bizarre concept. You know, it sets up a nice verve for the script where he has to kill people. Okay, now we know he's got to kill people every night. But it's also, it means this wolf is smart. This isn't the one from the Wolfman, who's a complete monster, or I'm sorry, a complete beast. This is more like, I don't know.
Like a regular person who's suddenly ridiculously hairy and doesn't want to show his face in public.
One of the other things that people talk about, again, the common
so let's now go into the
criticism of this is that this movie is derivative, and the other thing people always talk about is how it is derivative of the MGM Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I actually feel like in a lot of ways that is fair, although this movie, to me, has enough of its own thing going on to where I'm kind of like,
it doesn't bother me.
Yeah, but this does have a very Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde vibe to it, because this is the Jack the Ripper werewolf. You know, he operates like a serial killer, and when he turns into a werewolf, he actually thinks to put on a hat and cloak to actually cover up the fact that he's a freaking werewolf.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Tony, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree a lot with that. It is very Jekyll and Hyde-esque in a lot of ways. I noticed that throughout, and it's, not a bad thing, but definitely since, we would eventually get the universal werewolf, this is kind of like a new territory in a lot of ways. So, having a touchstone to something like that isn't necessarily a bad thing, and in fact probably helped to sell it. Oh, it's like Jekyll and Hyde, but this new thing's werewolf,
And I liked what Drew said about it being a Jack the Ripper kind of character. So there's Jekyll and Hyde. That doesn't bother me at all, because there's no 1941 to compare it to, So okay, he turns into a wolf. It means that he becomes more violent and more dangerous, but that doesn't mean that he loses his mind. And at least not in this movie. And again, we haven't seen the 1941 movie, so it's not like we have
like he's crazy. That's the thing. He doesn't seem ridiculous. I mean, yes, he suddenly jumps through a window, But
I
he seems
could
kind
envision...
of like. So he seems extremely angry. He seems super hyped up, and seems like somebody who's I don't know, cracked out
on taking too much testosterone also can be that way.
Yeah.
I mean,
that could work too. But he, for the most part, I mean, he's able to pretty much converse with people. He just hides his face, and but there's the bloodlust that's suddenly there.
Well, in a way, aren't vampires like that? Isn't the vampire sort of that way? He's smart, he's urbane, and he also really, really has a physical need to get out there and find somebody and fight them.
It's more. It's not. It's even though exactly. It's even though it's less than just a bite. With. There's something that I feel like it's less animalistic, even though it's still supposed to be, him turning into a werewolf. There's just something that doesn't strike me.
Well, the other interesting thing to me about this being a werewolf movie that deals with fidelity and relationship issues and a marriage, and the fact that he is a quote-unquote werewolf, and this makes him so enraged. Wolves are one of the only other animals that mate for life.
Interesting. Is that true?
That is true.
I did not know that. Okay. All right. That's really interesting. I did not know that. I don't know enough about wolves. But, I mean, I do notice that when he goes, like Jack the Ripper, what he does is he goes and he gets a cheap apartment in the bad side of town. And the first person he kills, I think it's the first person he kills, is a woman who is trying to entice a security guard at the zoo to leave his wife.
That's the second woman he kills.
That's the second woman he kills.
The first woman he kills is a like a Skid Row streetwalker. It's he starts heading over towards the party, that his wife is at, but instead, he stops himself and he kills this blonde girl. And instead, and it's actually one of the to me, one of the reasons why I like the makeup, because it's so creepy to sing in the fog. And, prior to that, the build up to that, this is what Jamie was talking about earlier, is like the transformation sequence to me is actually better than the ones in the Wolfman, because they have this where he's walking in between these pillars, and each time he walks by the pillars, it's a little bit more wolfy. Like instead of like the thing in the Wolfman where he just sort of sits down and turns into a werewolf.
That's true.
And, they do the lap dissolve. I mean, this is still the lap dissolve thing, but to me, this is a little bit more stylish, I guess.
Yeah, I agree.
It's almost poetic. I felt like this movie in a lot of ways is extremely poetic in its nature, and it just has so many things that's constantly referencing on different levels. I don't know. I find it surprising that you didn't think it was more memorable, Tony.
Yeah, I don't know. It just something about it. I don't know. I wish I could put my finger on it, but it didn't really gel. I mean, there's cool things about it, but yeah, I don't know.
Again, Tony's opinion is actually the majority. Like most people, when you go online and see people talking about this movie, a sort of ho-hum attitude toward this movie is actually very commonplace. I just want to keep repeating that.
Yeah. No.
Also,
I'm
irreverently, it did strike me, like even back in this day and age, I wonder if true scientists of the time see a movie like this with its like electrical effects and all this stuff and are going, that's not how science works. Like, that's not how a lab is. In the way that when I see video games or just hacking or something, anytime Hollywood people use a computer, like across the board, and especially on crime TV shows, which it's like no one lives in a world where anybody's used a damn computer. Like,
which is funny, because so much of those things are done by geniuses on computers.
You can pay somebody like $10. You can pay somebody $20 an hour to teach you how to make your actors look like these actors can use a computer. I guarantee you they can surf the internet, but they're given these stupid lines. And I just wonder if the scientists of the time look at these and go, that electrical things to work on plants, like all this stuff.
What?
Like, I just think it's
cool.
funny. No, it's cool. It's cool. I'm not saying that it's not. That doesn't look awesome, but it struck me that this has happened throughout film history, right? That if you are working on anything in botany, it is unlikely, although he's doing crazy experiments, that you would have anything also electrical in that same way. And the way that he does, he's
trying to manipulate it to have, there would be electricity going through it because he's trying to simulate moonlight.
I understand, but what I'm saying is that a Frankenstein's lab is probably not a traditional Mendel style like botany lab, right? And I just think it struck me as kind of funny that even throughout film history, I'm sure that scientists back in the day were thinking the same thing I do when I watch somebody operate a computer, especially anytime there's hacking, which is just hilarious and stupid. But I don't know, for some reason that just was one of my notes, and it's just something that struck me as that's strange, because he purposely has to power it down, and it's this whole Frankenstein lab kind of thing. But it looks great on camera, and that's why you do it,
I think that's the idea. But you're absolutely right. But we could also take it that totally, I agree with everything you said about the lab. Although it works for me because it's like this universal universe.
The horror lab is cool.
Scientists have zappy labs. That's just the way they operate. But, again, science in Universal is a weird supernatural mystery Marvel Universe-y kind of science where, of course, the moon's rays have cosmic powers, which I find fascinating. This idea that somehow moonlight, which just to recall is sunlight bouncing off of a large object in the sky, somehow moonlight has properties that does things scientifically.
But doesn't it? But not moonlight. But doesn't the moon? The moon has a gravitational pull. There's a proven out there. People get a little crazy when the moon is full. You know.
That's the concept.
Women's cycles. I mean, even that.
Yeah, there are things beyond our understanding. Is basically the point that science is racing to catch up to what we can know, and yet there's all of this more stuff that we don't know in the 1930s, and lo and behold, that means weird flowers and werewolves and all kinds of stuff, which is, like I say, that's the science that powers the Marvel Universe too, is a kind of crazy science that is essentially magical, which is fine, it's okay with me, but you're right, it would drive a scientist bonkers. So, okay, we have this phase of the film where there's the killing, and we also meet one more dinner party, and where Aunt Eddie, which is his really flighty aunt, he sneaks in to almost attack his aunt and then doesn't. And why doesn't he kill his aunt? Does anybody know? Because I don't even understand why the scene's there exactly.
I think it's the start of what we when you got decades later into horror films, what you see here is there had to be a scary scene every so few minutes for it to be a proper horror film, and I think that's the only reason why that scene here is there.
I disagree. I took it as that was after he had been told that he was going to start killing the one he loved. That was the first night that he doesn't, or the first time he doesn't succeed. It's all the same night that he goes after his wife.
Yeah.
So I don't see why you would think that he's.
Well, but he does.
I think it's more saying that it's not one. I feel like he goes after the prostitute first, easy sex. He's the first one who's unfaithful by thinking, oh well, his wife. He's got the seed of doubt. Then his second person is someone a little closer to home and an easier catch, but not someone that he's ever at least in the movie had met before. It's not someone, it's someone random. Now it's not until after someone tells him that he's been cursed with this affliction, that's not just he's not just having a hormone problem and that's why he's suddenly really hairy. It's not like a new puberty coming on. He's now suddenly, it's supernatural. It's the he's the werewolf. He is the man who is going to kill the person he loves most.
But
it's not going to be this lady who he doesn't care about, who is kind of obnoxious. She's got her dog with her, she's like the Paris Hilton of the day and age, but really not. It's Paris Hilton, like if she aged, I guess not, but you know what I mean. And,
no, I follow.
She's a socialite.
Really obnoxious. Yes, he's a really obnoxious socialite. He could have very easily just had her. No, he just is like, pushes her against the bed. She's just like, and they all think she's just drunk. So I think right there they're showing that that's not, now here suddenly, he's been told this is who he should go after. I don't know. I feel like it's not just random coincidence in this movie.
Well, he's going to the party because his wife is there too. Like he's drawn to his wife.
Well, he knew she was trying to get to go.
He was trying to get to her, and then I guess he segues into killing the aunt. But
and then
he doesn't kill the aunt.
He doesn't kill. He leaves once she. Yeah. Once she starts making a racket, because he's a smart werewolf. He's not the he's not the Wolfman. The Wolfman would have stayed there and ate her, but
he's not wild and frantic. He's like,
he's calculating. He's like, there's
a violent. I think Jamie's right. There's a violent sexual element to this that, in the end, the animal will not be interested, really, in killing the sort of slovenly, drunk, rich aunt. And so he splits. And
she's the wife's aunt, though, right?
No, she's the crazy, like, oh,
No,
I
I'm
drank
not saying
too
that. I'm
much.
not saying that. No, I know exactly the character we're talking about, but
whose aunt is she? I don't know.
whose aunt is she? She's kind of ambiguous.
I think she's just like general socialite. People have relatives that they call aunts that aren't actually their aunts. You know, I think that's more of like a close family friend or
because
whatnot.
She seems very okay with she's the one. She's always egging her on to hang out with Soldier Boy, and you know, so it doesn't seem like she's got much loyalty to Glendon. So I don't think there's any relation there. But you're right. How exactly she's attached to all these people is a bit
Speaking of
vague.
Soldier Boy, he's actually beginning this investigation now, you know, consulting with Scotland Yard like you do when you're a hero in a movie like this. And isn't it funny how this is a triangle that we even see in 2015 today, you know, the scientist and the soldier and the pretty girl. It's amazing to me how this is such a handy trope that you could use it today.
Although I think that they made this now, the scientist would be the hero instead of. Well, I mean, I guess, you know, he's the antagonist and the protagonist, but I'm saying that now we soldier heroes are not as common as they used to be.
I mean, if you think of like the Terminator, not Terminator, the Transformers movies.
I guess that's fair, but you know,
and in those you got the scientists. Yeah, go ahead, Tony. I think Tony was going to say something.
No, I didn't. No.
Oh, okay. I apologize. I thought I heard you. Maybe that was Drew. Okay.
The fact that there is like an investigation going, though, like a lot of the times people in these movies just kind of blunder on through them, and you know, at least there's somebody trying to do something. And you were about to talk about the wonderful scene in the zoo where which is actually recalled in American Werewolf in London, which we did a long time ago at this point.
Yes.
You know, and it is very interesting that the woman he goes after there is a woman that's trying to get a husband to leave her.
Isn't it funny? Out of all the business they could have given these two characters, they give them like 30 seconds of dialogue about how, hey, I've come to see you. Don't you want?
You don't really love your wife and kids. You love me.
Yeah. All of which is sad and pathetic, and also, I mean, it's all kinds of stuff. And then we see the we see the werewolf wandering in the background, which is so cool, you know, because he's wearing that big cloak. They really use the depth of field. You know, how do you pronounce the director's name? Clarence Shomak, I think it is. Is that right?
Your guess like I've never heard it spoken aloud by anybody who would. What now?
This one is actually Stuart Walker. I'm sorry, I apologize. So anyway,
no one has ever said.
Wait, are you talking about Curtis Automac?
I thought it was Shomak, but it's no. I thought it was somebody else. I thought it was Shomak. It's Stuart Walker. So we don't have to figure out how to pronounce that Polish name.
Walker.
Yeah. So yeah, Walker uses the depth of field. You can see the werewolf moving deep in the background, like way in the back of this, wherever they're filming this, whether it's a practical set or a stage or what have you, which is really cool. Yeah, I think that's. Well,
the fact that he's looming around these wolf cages is just so great.
Yeah, and it differentiates him from actual wolves, because the wolves.
Hey, you know, maybe he knew a shortcut through the zoo. Just wants to be a little creepy, looking at the police officer making it with those, you know, cheaty ladies.
I think there's something to that.
Well, the funny thing about this makeup. The funny thing about this makeup, you know, is that I actually find it in many respects more realistic, if we can use that word to describe a werewolf, than like what we've gotten into with werewolves, where they're typically just like an upright, ever since The Howling, the popular thing has been to just do it upright wolf. But there's just something, and I'm not, that's awesome in its own way, but there's just something more believable about this to me because it is so slight, and I don't know why that is, but
I like it because he's a satanic creature. He's not a wolf. He's not a wolf like the American Werewolf in London or the Wolves and Dog Soldiers. He is a satanic creature that, for want of a better word, we call a werewolf. I mean, it's.
Well, I think again, I still think it's like the Elephant Man. Like, I just feel like this was when this people still identified. Like today, we're more sensitive to people who have some sort of deformity, or malformation. Like I feel like everyone's just kind of glossing over it because it says werewolf, but I feel like it's a movie.
So you think of this as something like a viral disease because it is catching. It's communicable in this movie.
Yeah. This
couldn't
have been like. I mean, let's see. This couldn't be like syphilis, could it? Like, oh God, no. I just feel like this movie, like I keep saying, says so much about the day and time that it was made, and even like we briefly touched on the imperialism that was going on, and the Tibetan man or the Japanese man who meets him in Tibet, and now they're back in England, and then the American who's here, who he's so fancy free coming from California. There's just so many little things like this, and I don't know, I feel like it really kind of in a way makes it a little bit more modernistic. Like you can, like I said, see where maybe this is just the actual social and poetic commentary.
I mean, syphilis drives you crazy. So, your theory is pretty good.
I'd love to see, I would love to hear what, the actual director said about it, or the actual person, like the screenwriter, or is it him? I don't, how do you pronounce that? Was that?
Well, so just to explain, Drew and I were thinking of Shomak. Drew and I were thinking of this guy called Shomak, if that's how you say it, and I apologize.
Were you talking about Kurt Sodemak? The guy that wrote
Siodmak is a German director who made a bunch of things, but he made Son of Dracula.
Wait, did you say it's Siemak?
No, Siodmak.
Oh, because if he's German, it'd be Siodmak. But
okay, I'll buy that.
If he was German.
Okay. Well, it says, according to Wikipedia anyway, he's a German-born American film director, like many of them were. But no, this one, this one has a very pedestrian name of Walker.
What's sad about this is there's so much more written. Well, I mean, obviously there's so much more written about the Wolfman because it's a much more famous movie, and it's a better made film than this. But I like Jamie would love to know some of the stuff because there is, once you get into talking about it, all this stuff that
the layers.
But it could just have been a happy accident. They may not have been thinking about it like that. They may have just been like,
maybe nobody beforehand.
That Frankenstein show was popular. Let's make ourselves another Humdinger of a monster movie.
No, you're right, and
there's volumes written on the Wolfman. Most of the time, this is just a kind of a footnote when you read anything about horror.
What about
and
Scal?
I would love to know more about the making of this.
I mean, Scal has the Monster Show, and it goes into the history of Universal, but I don't recall what he covers in his discussion.
It's not very. It's less than a paragraph. I would almost gamble. I mean, I have that book. It's been years since I've read it, but this
is a definitive Universal history, I think. I mean, I don't think you'll find it.
Well, he's written a lot of stuff on the Universal Dracula as well, and probably more is probably the most respected scholar as far as Universal horror goes. And this is kind of a glossed over movie, which to me is why I wanted us to talk about it, because
you could write a book on this, Drew. I mean, you could dig deep. You know, if you go digging into files, you could probably find, you know, it'd be interesting to just dig deep into discovering the meaning of and the secret history of the Werewolf of London. It's also weird to me, by the way, that yes, it's the granddaddy of werewolf movies, but yet it's smack dab in the middle of the first Universal monster cycle. I mean, isn't that strange? You know, I mean, there's already been Dracula, there's already been Frankenstein, there's already been MGM's Jekyll and Hyde. This comes after. In a way, it's like the Hulk, or it's like the new Hulk with Edward Furlong coming after the other new Marvel movies and then being completely forgotten. You know, it's like a weird vestige that somehow wasn't.
I think you mean Edward Norton.
What did I say?
Edward Furlong.
Oh, well, that would have been a great Hulk movie.
Oh, Terminator on the mind, huh?
I know. That's probably actually what was going on in the background. How weird.
Maybe
so, anyway.
Did you have a secret longing that maybe Arnold Schwarzenegger should have played one of these parts?
Arnold Schwarzenegger would be a frightening Dr. Yagami, I think. And
oh my God!
You know, we should
It'd be like
talk
Dr.
about
Freeze.
Dr. Yagami a little more, because he's
we
to
could
me.
Actually change his name, but sorry.
Well,
he's actually the more traditional werewolf in this movie. Like in what we think of particularly the Universal movie Werewolf, he seems more tormented.
Yeah.
He seems more hung up on the fact that he's a werewolf. But also, we never really see him full on as a werewolf. We very briefly see the top of his head at the beginning. Yeah. And he starts to change and is killed by, spoilers, killed by Dr. Glendon, and before he really turned. We don't get to see a werewolf versus werewolf slugfest, which, as this had been made a decade later, surely that's what we would have gotten. And
yeah, he managed. Well, what's funny is he manages to get the cure. He steals the cure. You know, so that he can.
It's probably what gets him killed, though. If he turned into a werewolf, that's probably if he turned into a werewolf, he would have been able to defend himself. But
yeah,
you're
absolutely right.
You know, then it's an actor. Then it's an actor in yellowface, which makes it this very sort of objectionable thing to our modern liberal sensibilities. And you know, it is something I feel I'm a big fan of movies from this time period, and another vintage horror film I really like is Mask of Fu Manchu, which has Boris Karloff playing Asian, and sure. I've kind of had, even though I don't think this would be okay to do today, I've kind of had to learn to take the actors' performances in the movies they're in on their own face value, because I do think Warner Orland is, I do think Warner Orland is very good, and I do think he's actually very good in this part.
Oh yeah.
Here's the other thing. I'm gonna, in his defense, and I know you're supposed to believe he's supposed to be an Asian, but in America, how many of us have last names that don't necessarily fit the way we look?
A totally valid point.
And they don't actually say he's from Tibet.
They don't actually.
Well, he's from the University of Carpathia, is where he's actually a teacher.
Which has to be just some place he teaches, because he's got a Japanese name. So in other words, this is a world-traveling Japanese scientist living in Romania and traveling to Tibet, of all places.
Yeah, he could potentially be like second-generation Japanese for all we know.
Sure.
He doesn't really look like it, but you could see where, I feel like you could see where someone, he doesn't look like he's necessarily wearing yellow face makeup.
Not at all. He's not. That's just his face. Yeah. To Drew's point, I think this is really interesting. I think if you're going to be a student of film, you have to be willing to watch old movies and think about them and comment on them, and not just sort of turn away from them because you find the subject matter to be.
Well, this is, the idea of having a Caucasian person playing an Asian character is something that there was talk of doing a new Fu Manchu a decade ago with Antonio Banderas as Fu Manchu. And so there were still people talking about doing. There's still people talking about doing that.
Yeah.
Ben Kingsley's not Asian, is he? He was
right. He's the Mandarin. You're
Gandhi.
absolutely right. He was Mandarin.
That's one point. And
although
he was
the Mandarin in the Iron Man movies is almost a commentary on this kind of thing in a way, because it's the white people's appropriation of Asian iconography, but again though, like just taking it all on face value, we just say, you take away the sort of liberal peril of this because if I think about it too hard, it does sort of put me, because the older I get, inevitably the bigger of a bleeding heart I become. It's funny, like you always hear, oh, you become more conservative as you get older. That's not been the case with me. I've gotten more and more knee-jerk liberal the older I get. And yet, objectively, Warner Orland is very good, and all of his scenes with Henry Hall are great. They're some of the best things in the movie, and I would be lying if I said that I didn't enjoy his presence in this film.
He's a fine and very subtle actor. When he snaps at the maid because she's going to touch the flower, he then apologizes really meekly and gives her some money. But all of this feels very real. He's a good actor. I mean, this is a guy who had a weird career playing a lot of oddball roles. Well, actually, just a couple of oddball roles for a long time. But yeah, I think he's very talented. By the way, Henry Hull. Because we should wrap up soon, and we talked a little bit about the ending. But Henry Hull, American actor, here playing English, very handsome, sort of odd. I don't think
he has kind of a Colin Clive-esque speaking voice.
Yes, and I actually caught him the other day on an episode of Route 66 where he played a grizzled, angry, drunk New Orleans boat captain, and he's a very versatile actor. I don't think he became a real luminary in acting, but Henry Hull stuck around for a long time. Warner Orland had a very unfortunate alcohol problem, like I think was pretty common among actors of this period, I mean, he basically became such a terrible drunk that he was kicked off his last movie. It was taken over by Peter Lorre, and Warner Orland disappeared and turned up in Europe and eventually died. And, that's alcoholism for you. But he's very good. He's a very good actor. We should talk, let's see, you mentioned the end. So there's really not much more to touch there, I think, for the viewers.
He goes out to chain himself up in his wife's childhood home.
Yes.
And then, of course, that's exactly where, Whitey and the boyfriend show up.
Yeah.
And and this is probably the only time you ever see something like this. The boyfriend, Flyboy, and the werewolf get into a fight. And the boyfriend actually overpowers the werewolf and knocks him out, which is not something. If this was a modern movie, if this was the Wolfman, if this was just made in the 40s instead of, if we had a more concrete idea of what we think werewolves are capable of doing, the boyfriend would have been torn to pieces because a normal person could never hope to fight a werewolf. They're just too powerful.
Yeah.
And but in this movie,
well, they're like fighting a bear. That's what you said. He's like, yeah, it's got these claws.
Sure.
This guy just looks like he hasn't clipped his toenails in a few days.
Right,
Yeah.
but I mean,
Not
he's
like
powerful. In the context of the movie, he's super powerful. I mean, he broke out of the thing by ripping an iron bar out of the wall so he could get out. Maybe the bricks were a little loose, but yeah, it is something that our hero, who's now become the hero. They're basically the movie is the movie is not quite pure in a modern context, in that it kind of it flips heroes along the way.
Well, it doesn't really show loyalty to anybody, really.
Well, I mean, think about like the Fly, by David Cronenberg, which also does that. We follow Jeff Goldblum, but then at the end, we're asked, at least in the last couple of scenes, to put our loyalty with the kind of loser boyfriend of Gina Davis. It's very similar to that, I think. But yes, he does overpower
I don't
him.
know. I feel like, again, that's the difference in perception of the movie, because I don't feel like you're expected to believe that she suddenly loves this boyfriend from high school. I think she's still like, oh God, like she seems upset, legitimately.
I'm not suggesting. I think I agree with you. I think your point's good that him dying is the only thing that would free her up to be with this guy. I think she's very she's sad right now, but marriages go through ups and downs, and I don't think she has any intention of leaving her husband.
Well, they don't
I think
kiss. That was one thing. It's not like she suddenly kisses the guy or anything. She's not like suddenly
No. You're
overwhelmed
exactly
with passion.
Well, as affairs go, it's very chaste.
Yes. Yeah.
And
it's an inappropriate relationship. I think it would be fair to say that it's probably what we might nowadays call an emotional affair. I think it's a dependence that probably is not appropriate.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I think
she
she sees it as a platonic friendship. But once he's made it clear that his intentions are elsewhere, that's that's when you would have to put. Otherwise, you are involved in an affair.
She does have the one scene where she throws it in Glendon's face.
Yes,
like I'm going to go out riding tonight, and every night that there's going to be a moon, and she doesn't know that he's trying.
Yeah, she's not necessarily saying she's
she doesn't know that.
Well,
right.
she thinks he's trying to be controlling.
Yeah,
yeah.
Drew's right. She does that. That now, to Jamie's point, that doesn't mean that she's actually leaving her husband, but she is trying to get him to wake up. She's trying to get him to pay attention.
She's also going out like she's like, this is the early feminism as well. Women didn't have the right to vote, 15 years before this? Well, I don't even know when this movie takes place, but if it's in the 30s,
Universal movies,
it's been a relatively exactly. It's a relatively new concept, and it just doesn't seem. I think it's more
right.
of this she doesn't. He takes it as that because like I said, he's already enraged and jealous and deflecting the real problem, which is
right.
Which is just like
anthrophobia. He is not properly paying attention to an important part of his life, but anyway, it is all resolved by screenwriting because it's the end of the movie, and he now, because he has been afflicted with this terrible rage disease, basically, or whatever it is, this satanic creature that is upon him, he gets shot, and he stalks down the wife, breaks into the house. The boyfriend's coming with the cops, who shoot him with not even a silver bullet, just a normal bullet. Yes, that's right.
And then he gives this great speech as he's dying, which again, as a werewolf, he gives this kind of soliloquy.
Well, as Jamie was pointing out, this werewolf is, and as you've pointed out many times, this werewolf is a different kind of monster. He's more like Jekyll in a way. More like Hyde. He's more like Jack the Ripper than Larry Talbot, who turns into a true beast. I like it. And it's quick, regardless. But he.
Yes, if you don't, it's.
And that's the end, which, of course, frees up the wife now to return to a high-flying, ranch-owning police consultant flyer who loves her. So, in a way, Hollywood has...
just because she's consoled by him. She just wants her husband.
In the universe of fan novels that were published decades after this movie came out, there's actually a Universal Monsters team-up novel where we are to believe that she is pregnant with Glyndon's baby, who ends up being a werewolf. Now, I don't know if I can buy that, because I don't think I can't imagine Glyndon pulling himself away from his lightning gun quick enough to, I was like, well, when did this happen? Because he was a werewolf for like a week, and which the whole time he was ignoring his wife.
He gets back. Yeah. Maybe he's like the reunited, and it feels so good. I mean, he does.
Maybe he
home.
Didn't die. Maybe there's the unseen sequel where they would have been
because he didn't. It wasn't a silver bullet.
It wasn't a silver bullet.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Maybe he breaks out of the grave. That's a really, really valid point. Okay. So I know we've spent more time discussing this movie than the movie spends time being actually on the screen. So we should totally wrap up. Okay. But I'm really excited. There's so many things to talk about here. All right, but let's get our final thoughts. Drew, Tony, Jamie, and then I'll say whatever might possibly be left. So, Drew, lay it on us.
First off, I want to say this has been a really fun discussion, and I'm looking forward to the rest of this retrospective, because there's so much psychological implications of the werewolf genre, and we've just kind of touched the tip of that with this movie. I really like this film, and I hope this episode of the podcast will cause people to seek it out if they haven't seen it, or revisit it with maybe some fresh eyes if they've seen it and maybe been a little dismissive of it, because that's the commonplace opinion. And believe me, I like The Wolfman better. The Wolfman is a better film than this. But
you like the characters a little more.
Yeah, but this is an interesting film for all the reasons that we've discussed, and I think it's one that deserves more exploration from horror fandom.
Very good, very good. Tony, this movie didn't work as well for you, and I'm sorry we didn't give you as many chances as you could to lay that stuff bare. But lay it on us. What are your final thoughts?
Oh, well, I mean, I like the movie, and I think it's an interesting piece of film history, as well as, set up perhaps for what would become the werewolves that we kind of know and love. I think there's a lot of great stuff. Like I said, I wish I knew why, because it's got all that great stuff, I wish I knew why it didn't gel as much. But it's definitely, as a horror fan, you should seek it out and check it out. And there's some great performances. But I don't know if it's my werewolf movie that I'll go back to a lot.
Very good. Jamie, what are your final thoughts? Werewolf of London.
I like the movie. I think it's definitely worth a watch. I don't really have a ton of bad things to say about it if you can watch it with an open mind, and if you're a horror enthusiast, I'd imagine you would. But I think it deserves to be paid attention to. It's not something that, like how I thought the new Poltergeist movie should, it's better for a rainy day when you're cleaning. This movie, I feel like, I think I stumbled in basically when Drew with watching it. And I believe I was probably working on something because that's, what I'm always doing. And I couldn't ignore it, basically. Like, I found myself, like, actually drawn into it, like almost like watching a soap opera, where you're like, cue me up real quick. Like, so, and then, Drew's like, well, I could start from the beginning if you want. And I was like, oh, okay. So, it was one thing, like I said, I'd seen it once before, and I remember liking the movie, but having, like, kind of this, like, I don't know about everything, like getting kind of stuck on certain things, like, the idea of, like, Yellowface. But then, again, upon a second viewing of it, I was kind of, I don't know, a little bit more aware of certain things going on, or if you can look at it with a symbolic eye. I feel like there's a ton of metaphor and symbolism in what's being said, not only in regards to the times, but the way people interact with each other, and not just on a imperial level, but on a human and animalistic level. So I don't know. I think it was a good movie.
I think that's. I got nothing to add to that. I think you both covered on. All three of you covered on everything that could be said. I really enjoyed this, and at 75 minutes, it clips by pretty quick. So very cool. Let's do endorsements. I'm dying to know what you guys have been up to or watching, because we haven't had an episode in 2 weeks, regular episode. So, Drew, do you have anything to endorse this time?
I'm still, people are going to think, like, shut up about Secret Wars already. But I'm still just enjoying, they're up to issue 3 now. And I'm still just enjoying the hell out of the new Marvel Secret Wars. The art is gorgeous. Jonathan Hickman has been knocking it out of the park every issue so far. That the covers by Alex Ross are just wonderful. And again, like if you're a Doctor Doom fan, this is got to be a must read, because this has just been some of the best Doctor Doom stuff. And they just got into bringing back Reed Richards and him discovering that the God Emperor of the world is Doctor Doom. And there's just this great one-page white panel with like a Doctor Doom mask, and it says, God Doom loves all men except for one. And that's when they reintroduce Reed Richards. And I just love that right there. So, if you're a Marvel fan, it's going to hit a lot of your happy buttons. And like I said last week, everybody has been so stuck on the Marvel movies the last few years, and I enjoy those. But this is the kind of thing you're only going to get out of a comic book. And it shows why ultimately, even though I love film, like comics are really the form of storytelling closest to my heart, because they can just go so bigger and so broader and so crazier. And this has a lot of that. And God bless them for doing that.
Very good. Yeah, I
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, that's weird. Hello?
Yeah.
I'm
Jason?
here. We lose?
We lose Jason?
Oh, no.
Huh.
Wow. Who's next
Well,
on the endorsements? I'm sure he'll come
I
back.
don't know. Well, Jason says keep going on the podcast. I don't know. I guess we did lose him.
Okay, he'll come back in a second then. And he'll fix it in post.
Sure.
Well, that was my endorsement, so I guess Tony's next.
I have been on crunch, so I actually can't. I'm barely here anyway. I can't think of
Can you hear me now?
anything new that I saw other than a computer screen for the past couple of weeks. So hopefully the episode that I work on, the episode I have been working on, comes out in 2 weeks, and that's going to be amazing because I've seen the first comps from it, and it's going to look great. But as far as life outside of that, I know I've seen some stuff, but I'm not really coherent about talking about any of that. Although I did get Spring from Draft House Films, and I've heard that's really good. So maybe that'll be something I need to watch and see if that's what I want to endorse next time.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're back.
Welcome back.
Yes, I'm sorry. So I apologize. I don't know what happened.
We soldiered on without you. It's okay.
Yeah, no, I was listening, but my microphone had died, so I just switched to a different one. So I apologize if I sound a little distant. Jamie, did you have anything to endorse?
Of course. Although I have actually a few things, so sorry, Tony, I'm going to take some of your first. Okay, first off, I've got, if you're online and you're looking for, I don't know, just some way to be a decent human being and do something good for humanity, feel free to go to Indiegogo.com and check out the Unlimited Possibilities Fund for Girls Rock Austin. We have a crowdfunding campaign for our summer camp, and we are getting to the home stretch. It's our last week. Camp started today with our junior girls. That's age 7 to 9, and it was pretty wild. And we really do a lot to help girls in our community and can do a lot of good with that. We have over 200 girls that we service every summer, and more than half of those kids get some sort of financial assistance so that they can come and go to camp, learn how to play a musical instrument, write a song, be in a band, take a ton of great workshops on every part of, the music industry and, being a woman in entertainment and media and just in general, and dealing with gender issues and all the things that are happening now, things that women wish they would have had 10 years ago, wish I would have had when I was a kid. So we're doing something wonderful, and please support that. You can check it out at igg.me/girls-rock-austin-unlimited possibilities fund. So, as for something to watch, I have to say I haven't really gotten a chance to watch too many new movies recently, but I was on a Cheers kick when I needed something, light and funny. Netflix has the old ones, but I recently watched Wet Hot American Summer with my husband. That was a pretty funny thing to watch. Not horror related, but if you're looking for a good movie, it was pretty entertaining. But if you're looking for something scary or just a good time, I can't suggest a higher recommendation from myself other than the works of Mr. Drew Edwards, who's in our presence at this very moment. So I hope you all go out and check out Halloween Man, comic book, but again, just like this movie, filled with way more than meets the eye.
I can attest to that.
So,
absolutely, that's right. Absolutely.
And get a Comixology account while you're at it. You can get it really cheap, or you could just buy a real hard copy if you like, the book.
I mean, Halloween Man is a trip. I mean, it really is a trip. Drew, you're a really good writer, and so the stories are enjoyable. But beyond that, there's just so much knowledge about adventure and horror and all kinds of commentary that goes into it that I think is wonderful.
Plus, if you want something that's really on the nose, the latest issue features George W. Bush as a troll.
Sweet.
So I can be on the I can be on the nose too. But thanks.
Does it have
like
a jewel in his belly button? Oh, it's a troll doll, I guess.
So, I'm sorry. Did I cut you off?
No, I'm
done.
You're the finale. Okay, all right. I
want to go out. I can have some shameless self-promotion and say, like, oh, Danger Cake's new album. That's a hit in stores.
DangerCakes.net, right?
DangerCakes.net. We have the official copies within our grasp. There probably will be on the World Wide Web within a week. Oh, gotta love alliteration. And
of the new.
So, keep up with us on Facebook, DangerCakes.net. So things are getting a little, it's like getting sick in the UK. I'm starting to feel a little weird about all the friend requests I'm getting.
Really?
But yeah, I get over 200 friend requests a day now. And I have been slacking. I'm not the social media person because I'm actually doing things and don't want to be on my phone constantly. So, like teaching little girls how to rock. Or rocking myself. Like we just played the Hot Rod Standoff this past weekend in Gonzales, Texas, and it was quite a good time. So, we're doing good things out there. So, onwards and upwards.
And you can get the CD. I see the CD is available on the website as well, the new one, Quarter Life.
Yeah.
So, very cool. I got one endorsement. Last week I endorsed The Shining at Red Rocks, which is tomorrow night, so that is going to rock, but I don't need to endorse that again. If you're in Denver, though, you should go see The Shining at the Red Rocks Amphitheater, because it is a freaking amphitheater built into the foothills, and it's amazing, but that's that. So I got this book that, Tony, will blow your mind. It's called VHS Video Cover Art. It is a huge coffee table book of VHS covers, organized into genres like action and exploitation and horror and what have you, by Thomas Hodge, and it is truly wild. VHS Video Cover Art. If I can get that guy on for an interview, I will.
I've been wanting that in a major way. We've been wanting to move, and
yes.
I've been trying to hold off buying books that we're going to have to
the last
put
thing
in
you
the box
need is more coffee table books, yeah.
But I really, really want that one, like, a lot. So
it's amazing.
And I hate to interrupt, but I did remember our editor on Clockworks now, Joe, wanted us to talk about his friend's showing of Evil Dead 2. It will be in Lake Worth, Florida, Friday, June 19th, and it's a Palm Beach County Grindhouse event, and we should probably link that to our website or our Facebook page. But it looks like it's going to be really cool, and since we covered Evil Dead 2, I thought that'd be cool. We'll post that on the Facebook page, but I had forgotten to pay that forward, so I should do that for Joe.
Absolutely. We'll make a point of putting all of our endorsements. If you made an endorsement tonight, be sure to put a link on the page. Outstanding. Okay, we have just doubled the length of the Werewolf of London in discussing the Werewolf of London.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. God, I don't think we've gone this long since we discussed Creepshow, but fantastic. I've really enjoyed discussing this movie. I think I'm going to work on some gaming scripts tonight and watch She-Wolf of London and see how that goes. And I will.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you know.
You may like it. Jamie likes it and I don't. So hey.
Right.
What? Wait, what was that? The what?
She-Wolf of London.
Yes.
Oh.
Maybe I overestimated your enjoyment of it. When we watched it together, you liked it.
It's been a while.
I should wrap up. We need to let the fine people go. If you are listening from Bleeding Cool, we're glad that you're here. Tell a friend. Bring somebody who enjoys monster movies. We're going to be covering Werewolves for the next 3 movies after this. And
next week is The Howling. Booyah.
Yes. Oh my gosh, The Howling is going to be so cool to discuss with Robert Picardo of China Beach.
And werewolf sex, because you've been missing that in your life.
I wish we had done. I wish we were going to get to Your Sister is a Werewolf, the second movie, but I don't know if we're going to make it to that. But,
we can always we'll get.
We'll figure it out.
There's hope for werewolves for the future.
The Howling is next, and so leave us a review on iTunes. We want to hear what you have to say. Come to the Facebook page and argue with us. We will totally engage, and I hope you guys have a fantastic week. Thank you so much for being on and discussing Werewolf of London. Adios, everybody.
Night.
Good night.